All right, hello, East Central ISD. My name is Brandon Oliver, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications for East Central. And tonight we got a very special YouTube and Facebook Live with our superintendent. We're going to be talking about demographics and how things are going to look in the future. So I want to bring on the man himself, the superintendent, Mr. Roland Toscano. Mr. Toscano, how are you doing this evening?
Doing great, Brandon. It's good to see you on this platform. It's been a few weeks.
It has. It has. A lot's going on, and I know you're going to update us all about that and talk about these, demographics and kind of what the future, may look like here at East Central.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that everybody in the community sees a lot going on as it relates to housing developments, and the board commissioned a demographic study this past fall. We hired a new demographer that focuses on fast growth communities. In fact, it's the same demographer that's worked with Bernie ISD and Church Cibolo Universal City ISD in recent years, because those two communities have experienced, as we all know, very fast residential development in the last decade. And it looks like that's what we're beginning to experience. And so what I have for the community tonight is a brief summary of what the demographer presented to the board as findings and general recommendations, and kind of where the board is regarding their next steps. And so with that, Brandon is sharing a slide deck that we will want to publish tonight as part of tonight's broadcast, that we want everybody on the call to share with neighbors and friends and family members, and make sure that everybody in the community has this information. So on the first slide, one of the questions that we might all be wondering is, why in the world are we seeing so much residential development in the East Central community? And what we know is that the regional economy, as it relates to the East Central community, is experiencing a lot of changes. One of those things is that there is a ton of job growth in the San Antonio metro area and on our side of town. Mortgages are historically low. It is a it's a seller's market. And any of you in the community that have tried to buy or build a home recently know that you can't hardly get into a home because they're selling as fast as they're listed. There are local jobs in the thousands. We've all seen on Foster Road the HEB Fulfillment Center, which is a growing campus that by the time it's fully developed is going to have 2,000 jobs. That is going to be located in our school district, and it's already open and operational, as you all know. Most recently, we learned of a third Amazon fulfillment center in the San Antonio area. There's one in Brook City Base on the edge of our district, but this one is also in our school district. And when it's built out, it'll be 1 million square feet, and it'll have 1,500 jobs. In addition to that, one of the other big job or employers is Oaken. Oaken is an international company that does back office operational support for companies, and very fast growing, very reputable company. All of these companies pay very well, have great benefits. They're all located in our district, and Oaken's going to have 1,400 jobs when they're built out. And all three of these organizations are already hiring and employing citizens. And for those reasons there, a lot of folks are moving out this way to be in proximity to the jobs that they have. In addition, since probably 2014, when the city of San Antonio undertook their SA 2020 initiative, they were projecting as many as 1 million new citizens by 2030, and even more than that by 2040. And so I've read reports that by 2030, we'll have as few as 700,000 new citizens in San Antonio, to as many as 1 million by 2030. And so obviously the housing market has to account for that. And then, as we all know, the greater northwest and northeast sides of San Antonio, they've been building out for a long time, and they have limited property available for residential development. And the thing that really triggers residential development at the end of the day is infrastructure, primarily sewer. And we know that with some newly developed sewer plants in the community, but most recently SAWS, running sewer infrastructure in the school district, that now the sewer infrastructure is able to handle a significant number of new residential developments. So where in the world is all of this development going to be concentrated? Depending on where you live, you certainly see residential developments probably anywhere in the school district. But this particular map shows that between now and 2025, the subdivisions that are indicated in red are the fastest growing. They'll be the first ones occupied or filled. The ones in orange are right behind them, and the ones in yellows we're monitoring very closely because those houses are being built at a very rapid rate and selling at a very rapid rate. And interestingly, the last time the board had a demographic study around 2014, 2015 timeframe, most of the residential development was north of Highway 87 in the northwest sector of the district, which you can see there, the Arcadian, Hunter's Ridge, Paloma, Knox Ridge in the northwest. They're still booming, and more residential developments are starting to form all around there. But unlike the last demographic study, we're also seeing a large number of residential developments in the southwest corner of the district. The last demographic study during that time, you may all recall that we had a industrial corridor because of the oil field industry. The oil industry was booming during that time, and we had a lot of oil field industry commercial development in that area, not as much residential, but to date, we have just as much development beginning to happen in the southwest corridor of the district, Highway 37 corridor, as we do in the northwest sector of the district. Now, that's just over the next 5 years. In the next slide, we're going to show you between 2025 or between now and 2030, and you can see that the residential developments that are red, green, or red, orange, and yellow are magnified. By 2030, many of these developments are going to be advancing in the number of homes that they have available and that are occupied. And so this trajectory of residential development is not projected to slow down between now and 2030. So on the next slide, it's showing us the difference between starts, which are foundations being poured, construction starts, up to 2019, and you can see those numbers kind of fluctuated up and down a little. But beginning in 2020 and up through 2029, they're actually identifying occupancies. These aren't just homes that are being constructed. These are the homes they project to be actually occupied. And these are all single family homes, and that'll be real important as a distinction from multifamily homes in just a moment. But we have a significant number of occupancies between now and 2030 that more than double what we're currently experiencing in actual starts. So what's listed here are the top 20 subdivisions. In other words, the subdivisions in the East Central community that have the highest number of homes available. Between 2020 and 2025, you'll see when you total that down where it says 5,568, that's the number of homes that by 2025 will be available just in those top 20 subdivisions. But in the East Central community, there will be 8,192 single family homes available. But as you move to 2025 to 2030, you can see that there will be an additional 5,619 homes from those subdivisions, but a grand total of 9,420. But by the end of 2020, when you aggregate all of these, as well as all of the single family subdivisions in the school district, we'll have 11,187 just from these top 20, but more than 17,000 new single family homes in the East Central community, up from 8,100, which is where we'll be in the next couple of years. So more than doubled housing availability in the school district. So just another way to look at the difference, basically the kind of homes that are being built in the school district. These are single family homes. These are typically 3-bedroom, 2-bath. A lot of times they're first-time home buyers or young families. And so single family homes, which are what most of the development is, tend to have a higher percentage of school-age children coming from those homes. A multifamily home is an apartment complex. An apartment complex is generally as a rule of thumb, yield less number of school-age children per unit. And then, of course, we have some mixed-use development. We'll see more of them, but not as abundant in a single family. We won't have any new nursing home or residential facilities, and very few manufactured home developments. So what we're predominantly seeing are single-family homes in subdivisions that are producing single-family homes. And as I just said, on the next slide, you'll see what the yield generally is, yield being school-age children per household. So single-family homes, you normally see about 0.4 or about half a kid per home that is school-aged. And in multifamily, which are typically, again, apartments, you would see about a quarter of a child per home. So this is what demographers use to project the number of school-age children that would be feeding from these residential or multifamily developments into our schools in the area. And so just to kind of summarize, we're continuing to see significant growth in the northern region of the district, predominantly around 1518 and Abbott Road, just across the St. Hedwig ETJ. So they'd be right on the outside of St. Hedwig. There is a multi-family apartment complex just north and west of I-10 as you move towards Judson area. And so if you're going from our district or St. Hedwig on 1604 towards Judson and you go underneath I-10, if you look up on the hill to the left, you'll see this huge apartment complex. There'll be 324 units. And I'm mentioning this because a minute ago I said apartment complexes normally yield about a quarter of a school-age child per unit, but 60% of those 324 are actually going to be 3 and 4 bedrooms, which is not typical. So 3 and 4 bedroom apartment units generally yield 3/4 of a student per unit. So a much greater yield, much greater impact on enrollment in the school that they would be attending in our district. And then we're continuing to track large sales of what was formerly ranch property or farming property. When you see huge tracts of land like the one on the east side of 1604, 400 to 600 acre tracts, those are generally purchased by developers who intend to develop as subdivisions, in most cases single family subdivisions. Again, as I also mentioned before, unlike 2014, we're now seeing residential developments on the I-37 and a whole lot up 181. I didn't mention that a minute ago, but I know that in the last year and a half or so, we all read the Wilson County News article about the activity in Elmendorf right at 181 and 1604, where a huge residential development was projected to be developed, about 3,500 homes. And we know that city of Elmendorf has made a huge amount of progress in infrastructure out there that is going to support the acceleration of the development of those homes and them becoming available in that area. And then lastly, some of the other things our demographer noted is that on Highway 87, there is what's called a Gates tract that I believe was purchased by Gordon Hartman. There's plans for 1,400 to 1,500 lots to be developed there. There is the Reynosa tract that is just south, or rather just east of Heritage, right across the street. It's going to be 1,800 lots developed there. There is the ranch in Elmendorf, which I was just referring to at 1604 and 181. That'll be 3,400 lots planned. Holy cow, my eyeball popped out. And then between Foster Road and Loop 410, which is right across from central office, there are a couple of developments. One is the Mosaic development, which is off Toscano Road, which turns into W.W. White Road back in there. It's 1,300 lots. And then the R City development tract, or Boralis Incorporated tract, is the one I was just referring to across from Foster Road, across from a central office. It's 2,500 acres. And their long-range plan is to build 5,000 homes in 4 phases right along Sulphur Springs, from central office all the way to 410 frontage, all the way to W.W. White on 410 frontage. So there'll be mostly residential there with some commercial frontage on 410. So one thing that we've always monitored is a charter activity in our community. We have historically had a number of charter schools in our school district, and what we've seen in recent years is the development of new charter schools, and we've also seen the expansion of existing charters. And so gradually, we've seen a gradual increase of the percentage of students that live in the East Central ISD but attend either a charter school, which is where most of them who don't attend East Central schools may attend. They may be homeschooled, or they may be in a private school. Of course, if they're not attending our schools, the majority of them tend to be enrolled in one of the charter schools in the area. Or another trend is that many school districts in the area are beginning to have open enrollment. In other words, they have no school boundaries. And so I know that some of our neighbors have open enrollment. And so this just kind of shows which districts are being impacted most by charters, but we're moving up the list slowly but surely. And so I think the next slide kind of shows a little bit of an indication of that trajectory over time. That basically, of the percent, if we take 100% of school-age children in the district, way back in about 2014, almost 90% of those students would end up in our schools, and about 10% would end up in one or more of those other school options. But you can see that percentage is gradually dwindled. And to date, in 2020, about 17% of our students that live in our community are either in a private school, homeschooled in another public school district, or in a charter school in the area. And I show this slide because it's something we also have to consider in the future enrollment probability. And this is just births to how many kids show up in kindergarten. So how many children were born, and then 5 years later, how many children were born in our community that actually end up in kindergarten. And the thing that we're most interested there is just the trend line. Is it growing? Is it flat? Is it declining? And if you just take a line of best fit, you can see that up through 25, we're seeing a gradual increase in births and a gradual increase in the number of kids that are showing up in our schools in kindergarten. There's a COVID-19 indicator line there, and it's just showing that, every school district showed about a 3 to 7% decline in enrollment since the onset of the pandemic. And demographers project that about half of those will return this next year, and by year 2, everybody will be back in the routine of coming to school, and enrollment patterns will continue to recover then. So typically in our school district, we've historically assumed about a 2% growth rate. So we always project to have about 2% new students in increased enrollment each year. So that always ends up being between 120 and 200 students, depending on the year. So you can see that from about 2014, 13, we had a nice little incline. It kind of leveled off and steadied at manageable 1 to 1.3%. And then it started to jump again in 14, 15. Sorry, this starts all the way back in 27. I couldn't see with the bottom bar there a minute ago. And then we saw a little bit of a decline. And of course, the 4.1% is the COVID effect. And so the demographers are saying that you have experienced historically manageable growth, meaning that you could make little adjustments to school boundaries, you could make adjustments to grade configurations, you could utilize your classroom spaces more wisely, maybe even consider some portables, maybe float some teachers so you can use classrooms more efficiently. But that by managing this, you could get to a place where your schools are completely full before you need to build new schools, and it wouldn't happen faster than you could manage. And so that's what we've been familiar to in the East Central community. However, what the demographers are seeing is that this is considering all of these variables to include considering a continued pattern of charter, private, neighbor school district leavers. In other words, students that would otherwise go to our schools because they live in our community, they're choosing one or more of these other options. So even considering that trend line to continue, You have what they're giving us: a low scenario, a moderate scenario, and a high scenario. And so the one that they think is actually realistic and relatively conservative is the red dotted line, if you will. And what they're projecting is that we're currently at 9,730 students. By 2025, we'll be up to over 12,000 students. And by 2030, we'll have over 17,000 students, which, I'm no mathematician, but that's a 75% increase in enrollment in the next 10 years. That's the one that PASA says to our board is the most likely probability. If the economy recovers fully, if mortgage rates stay low, and if the job market continues to grow, they said, don't be surprised if you double your enrollment by 2030 and have over 19,000 students. If the economy crashes, if mortgage rates skyrocket and the local job market starts to freeze or regress, we should expect, in the worst case scenario, to go from 9,700 students to almost 15,000 students by 2030. And again, after a lot of scrutiny and a lot of questioning, the demographers came back with confidence that we should prepare in the next 10 years to have to serve more than 17,000 students in the East Central District. So what does that mean if we follow that moderate scenario? What does that mean for our enrollment? So if you look from 2021 to 2025, we would go from just over 10,000 students next year to 12,500 by 2025. But what I want you to pay attention to is the percent growth. So remember on a previous slide, the line graph, I said that we're used to 2% on average, and that's really manageable. But immediately beginning next year, we're going to start experiencing over 4% growth and growing to 5%, 6%. And as you approach 2030, 6 and 7% year over year. That's more than 3 times what we're used to dealing with. And so again, when we have 2% growth year over year, we can manage that with a lot of strategies to use our facilities very efficiently. And it doesn't require us to build schools really quickly. But what we're starting to see now is going to really challenge our traditional methodology for accounting for enrollment growth. It's going to be a lot less manageable. And so what does it mean for individual schools in our district? At the elementary level, this chart shows on the first column each of our elementary campuses. On the second column, this is the capacity of those schools. That's how many students can be served in those schools. It has our current enrollment in the third column. That's how many kids are actually enrolled. And then each year after that is what's projected to be enrolled. And the most important part here is the industry standard is to take capacity to 120% before you say you're at capacity. So even though tradition, for example, has the ability to serve 901 students, you wouldn't consider tradition to be beyond capacity until 2023, where it has 120% of 901, which would be 1,100, more than 1,100 students essentially. So the demographer projects that by 2023, keeping in mind we're in the year 2021, with the development that they see on the ground already, tradition is going to be beyond capacity by 2023. What does that mean? We're going to have to either add portables or we're going to have to create some relief for tradition in the north sector of our district. So you can follow the same kind of pattern there. The next school that's going to reach capacity would be in 2026. That's Harmony. Again, that's 120% of capacity. Highland Forest by 2027, and Oak Crest also by 2027. So what the demographer suggested as an illustration, and I put a little disclaimer on the top left corner of this slide, this is for planning only. The Board of Trustees has not made any decisions about future school sites. They've not made any decisions about a bond program. They've not made any decisions about any of those things. This is simply the demographer saying, if the community was going to begin to target areas in the district, they would target In 2023, the area roughly that says new elementary that is to the west of tradition. So somewhere in that area, they're suggesting by 2023, you need to build another elementary school if you're going to account for this growth. And then on the southwest corner, by 2026, in order to relieve enrollment at Highland Forest, Harmony, and Oak Crest, in that bottom southwest region, they're suggesting that we are going to need another elementary school by 2026. And then by 2028, in the far northwest region of the district in red, we're going to need a third elementary school in the north sector of our community to accommodate all of the growth that is projected. In terms of middle schools, it looks like during this demographic period between now and 2030, that Legacy will reach capacity but not exceed capacity. Of the development because of the current school boundaries that we have by 2024, Heritage will be at 120% capacity and be over 1,600 students. And so as a recommendation,
Mr. Toscano, if I can interrupt real quick, I think there's something with your mic. I don't know if you have something covering it or something.
Okay. Where did you lose me?
All right, right there. You just started talking about Heritage
Okay.
2024.
Thank you. So because of our current school boundaries and because of where the residential development is projected to be developed, Heritage will reach capacity by 2024. And again, that's 120% of capacity. Legacy looks to be able to accommodate what it's going to be receiving in terms of enrollment through this demographic period, which is 10 years, so through 2030. And by 2030, it will be at capacity, but had not reached the 120% threshold, so wouldn't be considered beyond capacity yet. And so as a result, the demographer, again, another disclaimer on the top left, their recommendation is it will need a middle school by the year 24-25 in the north sector of the district, somewhere in that purple area. Now, everybody in the community knows that on the Tradition site, the school district also owns an additional 30 acres on that property, which is capable of accommodating a middle school on the same property that Tradition is housed on. And that kind of follows our model where we have Legacy adjacent to Salado and Heritage adjacent to Oak Crest. And so in terms of a high school, our capacity at the high school as it currently exists is 3,666, and that's because the high school has grown to absorb South Campus, which was formerly Oak Crest and formerly the original East Central High School before that. And most recently, it absorbed John Glenn as an extension of the high school CTE programs, as well as our Cass Lead High School. And so taken together with the enrollment projections as a result of this residential development over the demographic period through 2030, we're going to see the high school exceed capacity in the year 2030. And so in summary, the demographer has indicated a need for 3 elementary schools, the first of which in the north by the year 2023, the second of which in the south by 2026, and the third of which in the north by 2028, and a middle school by the year 2024 in the north, and that by 2030, the district's going to have needed to have made provisions for what to do next regarding high school enrollment.
All right, so that's a perfect time for questions. And we do have some rolling in. So let's take a look at some of these comments and some of these questions. We have one talking about the farms that are going up for sale and the cheap homes that are going on them. Beck Road that continue across Sulphur Springs, going to take people land. I'm one of them that takes road across the back of my 127 acres and landlock one on the far side of their road that continues to Burchard Road. He's not happy one bit.
Yeah, I know Ms. Schwarzkopf's not, and many landowners and family, generational family landowners in the area are struggling with this. There's this happens in communities where they're targeted for residential development, and these developers come in and buy up big pieces of property when families are forced to make the decision of whether the return on farming investments over time really justify not accepting the offer. And historically, folks keep their land and they keep it in the family, but there comes a point in time when I guess the offer is something folks can't refuse. And as Ms. Schwarzkopf is indicating here, sometimes their strategies are inconsiderate of landowners in the area with regard to, how they sell land and how they create easements and access land. And, I've never experienced this kind of thing firsthand. So this is kind of new to me, but as I understand it in working with the demographers, this is kind of a common pattern that happens. It happened in the Northwest. It happened in the Northeast, part of San Antonio, and of course in other communities throughout Texas when these things start to occur.
Jessica Grimm, knowing that the district will be growing rapidly due to the new development, what can the school district do to improve the school's rating when purchasing or leasing a home in the area, saying that some of the ratings are low here?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ms. Graham, and that's a super moving target because it depends on what's being used to determine ratings. If we're talking about standardized test scores and state accountability, or if we're talking about different tools that real estate agencies and companies utilize. Oftentimes those ratings are generated by the public who participate in rating their schools. And sometimes when you look at those ratings, there's a total of 5 ratings, and that determines the school's rating. And then sometimes they've got hundreds of ratings, which tends to be a little bit more of a realistic view from the perspective of the participants. And so at the end of the day, Ms. Graham, we look at all of those things. We try to make sure that they reflect accurately and account accurately for everything that our schools are offering and the results that our students are producing. And we'll continue to strategize around those things. But what I suggest to any parent is to be engaged with their campus, get to know their teachers, pay close attention to what's going on in the classroom and what programs are being offered, express any of your feedback candidly, because the expectation is that your individual child's experiences meets your family's expectations in all metrics, not just standardized test scores, but in all of the areas that you value and that we share as making sure we're educating the whole child. And so sometimes I guess what I'm saying is these metrics are very narrow and they don't tell the whole story, and they're based on averages. And so it depends on who you ask. You can ask one family and they'll tell you it's the best school that they've ever experienced with the best teacher, and they've got multiple children that have been through the system. And then you ask another who had a bad year with a bad teacher, and they'll tell you it's the worst school they've ever been at. So at the end of the day, we got to do what we got to do to make sure that every experience is top notch, and that every family feels like their needs were met, and that we shared the same values that they did for their child's education experience. And so I wish there was an easy solution, but it's going to take time, and we're on it.
Let's see. Jamie asked, she said, I know this may be out of the district's responsibility, but with all the planned growth, has there been any input on keeping crime rate from skyrocketing?
I believe it's Mr. Coleman, and we definitely are in conversations with the county and the city, SAWS, to kind of look at traffic studies, traffic impact studies, to try and make sure that we've learned lessons from fast growth areas in the city, like Bandera Road area, and make sure that our infrastructure in terms of the roads, the arteries that feed in and out of our district are accounted for when considering the increased traffic that we'll be seeing. And likewise, make sure that we have increased patrols and the ability to respond to emergencies, whether that's fire support and whether that's law enforcement support, supervision, monitoring, and presence. That all of these entities that we rely on as public service entities, that they're aware of this growth, that they're planning for this growth, and that they're going to be accounting for this growth in their staffing and in their service areas. Here in our community, where we're going to be experiencing as much as double the growth. That's a fantastic question, Mr. Coleman, and I would encourage every citizen to pay close attention, to see what City Council's doing, to see what Commissioner Court's doing, to pay attention to the board and their activity at SAWS, and make sure that the conversation about the southeast side of San Antonio is a frequent conversation, because those conversations should be happening now, and those plans should be being made now to ensure that all of those services are accounting for the growth that we're currently talking about.
All right. And my apologies, Jamie. Let's see. Amanda, when will the board start discussing the new elementary school possibility?
So Ms. Banker, the board actually assembled a community committee 2 months ago. And so there's representatives from all areas of the district that we shared this demographic information with, and the board broke them into 4 subcommittees. And we have one group that's about 10 or 12 people that are studying all of our elementary schools and how the demographic study will potentially impact our elementary schools. Another committee is looking at secondary schools and all of the facilities in the district, the auxiliary support facilities, and how these changes will impact the need for secondary schools and or support facilities. If you can imagine, if we double enrollment, that's going to affect our transportation, that's going to affect food service. And so what are the implications for facilities, staffing, equipment, et cetera? And then the third committee is looking at the academic program, making sure that everything that we currently have in our academic program meets the needs of our children, our staff, and that it aligns with what the community expects. And that as we talk about new schools, that we're talking about equity of opportunity and equitable facilities in all of our schools, so that it, again, when you attend a school in our district, you should have the same amenities or similar amenities. You have the same opportunities in any of our schools, regardless if they're new or aged. And then the fourth committee is looking at the financial position of the district. So they're looking at tax rate, historical tax rates, property values, bonding capacity, the history of bond programs in the district, what would be the implication of a bond program at different values, what would be the projected cost of new facilities, and kind of marry all of those things together. And again, all 4 of those committees, after the first month, came back with some initial findings. And this next month, they'll be coming back with some recommendations that ultimately, between now and July, they'll be bringing back to the board as recommendations based on everything that they've discovered for the board to consider.
Megan Riley asks, would building need to begin before 2023, or would it potentially begin then?
Yeah, so that's a really fantastic question, Megan, because this process, it's going to take time. So we're in the process of studying as a community what all this means. They've got to make some recommendations to the board. The board will then evaluate all of those recommendations, prioritize, and then based on what we're able to do and what we need, determine if we take anything to the voters and by way of a bond program to consider possibly new construction or renovations. Should the community support such a bond program, then you got to go through the design, you've got to go through contract awarding, and then construction. And from the time that the community were to pass a bond to the time that we would begin construction or complete construction could be as many as 3 years. And so we're on a timeline that if we were going to build our first elementary school as part of this program, we probably wouldn't be able to open that school any earlier than 2024. And so we're slightly behind. And the thing about that is we've made some provisions at Tradition anticipating this could happen. And we have the ability to add some portables there. We have some infrastructure, so we can kind of limp along until 2024. But much longer than that, we're going to have to get very creative as a community, if we're going to accommodate all of those needs.
All right, and let's see. We got one more from Chris Alonso. How about putting some investment into the ag department, the high school, new barn, new arenas?
Yeah, I appreciate that feedback, Mr. Alonso, and that is something that the committee may identify and recommend to the board. I'll say that we certainly all have a desire to continue to invest in all of our programs, to include our ag program. Fortunately, in 2008, we were able to build the facility that we see there today, and I believe it was about a $4.5 million investment by the community. And with the quality of our ag program, I would argue, as you are arguing, that we may need to take a closer look and continue to accommodate the continued growth and quality of that program. And so thank you for that feedback. And if it doesn't come up in the findings by the secondary committee, we'll make sure that they include that in the conversation.
All right. And Yvonne said new high school in the future with some question marks and emojis. And you see family strong.
Yeah, we preliminarily, before the board assembled that committee, we sent a survey, a thought exchange out to the community, and maybe many of you actually participated because we wanted to share with this committee, the board wanted to share with this committee the things that they thought that they perceive were needs. And actually, one of the most popular thoughts was that we need relief at the high school. It's too large. We have too many students. And so the reality of it is we've got quite a bit of space to accommodate growth over the next 10 years. But what the board and the community have to decide is how big is too big, and what would we do along the way if we don't want a high school with nearly 4,000 students. And so it's definitely part of the conversation, Ms. De La Fuente, and we'll see where that lands. But as we talked about so far in this conversation, there are a lot of facility needs.
Jamie has a follow-up. I'm really glad to see the growth, but at the same time very concerned because we're going to have a very rapid growth in school-aged kids. But out here in this area, there are very little activities outside of school for them. Has there been any discussion on building a rec center out this way?
So there's a couple of conversations around that topic, and this is definitely one of the findings that the Elementary Facility Study Committee came back with. They felt like we really needed to look at recreation opportunities for our students. There is a development that has been in the works for a long time that may be getting a little traction in the Pecan Valley area. It's called the Valor Club, and the group is going to be addressing the board Thursday with kind of some updates to the progress that they're making and some of the plans that they have. Their focus is to create housing opportunities for retired veterans or disabled veterans, and that to build around that some community facilities. And they've approached the school district with a request for us to share some needs for activities and recreational opportunities for our students. And so we've been in dialogue around what some of those things might be. In addition to that, we've had a community group through the Best Homeowners Association. I believe Mr. Chris Dawkins had been really working aggressively in the last couple of years to try and get some business and industry partners, as well as some city and county support for a recreational center, if you will, for our community. And so he's got some pretty robust plans, and he got a little bit of support. And we hope to see either of those things come to fruition in partnership with the district. And so we are definitely in the middle of those conversations, and with what we're learning recently in regards to this growth, we need to double down on those efforts. So thanks for sharing that point of view, Mr. Coleman.
All right. I want to be respectful of your time, Mr. Toscano. So I do want to ask one question. I know sometimes we get on social media. Do you have an update regards to next year in remote learning?
Yeah, so I do want to let the community know that we'll be following up with all of those who applied for remote learning. I know that you've all been notified about whether your request was approved or denied. Again, this is all contingent upon legislative action. As of right now, we don't even have the ability to offer remote learning, but we're planning to offer it should we have families who prefer that for their child. At this particular point, we have about 140 students pre-K to 12th grade in our system that are interested in remote learning for next year, which was a bit of a surprise. We expected to see a higher percentage of students interested in remote learning. And so as a result, we don't, in almost every grade level, we don't have enough students to even make one class. And so we're going to bring that information to the board Thursday and talk about some options that we might consider. And the most viable of which is to possibly enter into a shared service agreement with neighboring school districts so that together we might be able to build sections of remote learning at each grade level so that it is an option. But again, that all is pending legislative action, and it's also pending an ability to negotiate set arrangements with multiple school districts. But at this particular time, if we have to go at it alone, it's not fiscally viable for us to offer, for example, a first grade remote teacher for 6 students. And so in many grade levels, that's what we're seeing, not enough students to make a class, not even close. So we'll follow up with you individually if this affects you. And again, we're seeking some direction from the board on Thursday, and we're working to explore every possibility in the event we are able to offer remote learning in the fall. So more to come on that. Thanks for asking, Brandon.
And Amanda did have a question here. And actually, there's a question and a comment. I want to get to the comment too. But Amanda asked, would it not be as cost effective to transform portable buildings into a slightly bigger building to expand some space like at Oakcrest?
Yeah, Ms. Binker, a short-term solution could be portables. And that's what we've done at Oakcrest, and that's traditionally what we've done when we begin to exceed capacity in any of our schools. They're definitely short-term solutions. As far as cost-effective, in the short term, they bridge a gap. In the long term, they're not a good investment. They lose value really quickly. They're not as durable. They cost much more to operate, and they're not as secure. And so they definitely meet a short-term need, but they're not a wise investment long-term.
All right. Thank you, Amanda, for that question. And the last one is a comment, and I think it's really interesting when talking about growth. So Melissa Cortez Rodriguez, seems like we're slowly losing the country life out here, but still getting a great learning experience for our children. Thank you, East Central.
Well, we certainly appreciate that sentiment, Ms. Rodriguez. I can tell you that no matter what happens out here, that is our responsibility to make sure that you and your children have a fantastic experience, and that we adjust when it's not working, and that we're accountable when we don't deliver. There is an amazing staff in every department and in every school in our district, and occasionally folks don't rise to the standard, and they don't survive here, right? But at the end of the day, we know what the community expects. We are going to be accountable for delivering on that, and we're going to adjust when we're not. And we need your engagement, and we need your feedback in order to continue to deliver on what Ms. Rodriguez is commenting on as her experience. We want to hear that from every single parent of every single student, and we're going to keep working hard until that's the reality.
Thank you very much, Melissa, for that comment. And so we're going to wrap this up. Very informative, lots of great information about what the next, 5, 10 years is going to look like here at East Central. And Roland Toscano, the superintendent of East Central, thank you so much for your time tonight. And I'll leave you with the final comment as we wrap this up.
Yeah, I just want to add again, where is it? Brandon, could you please tell everybody where this is posted, along with all of the other archive Facebook Lives? This particular one, I want to make sure that everybody tonight is sharing it with friends and family. Of course, you'll put it out on social media. We just want to make sure everybody has this information and can offer feedback and ask questions as you all got the opportunity to do tonight, because we want to make sure the board has the best information
Yes.
possible, and that the community is completely aware of what we know.
So after the program is finished tonight on the website, I will post not only this video, a link to this video, but also a link to the presentation as well. And so it'll be up there in the header and the big part of the website at ecisd.net. And like Mr. Toscano mentioned, we'll post it on social media and other things as well. But we're going to put it right smack right in the middle at the top there.
Okay, and one, I see Miss Binker. I'm sorry, Miss Binker, I misunderstood your question about the portables. You're exactly right. And if you'll recall, in 2016, during that construction program, we renovated 4 aged campuses. We removed all the portables at Salado, for example, and we were able to do some expansion to the gym and add classroom space and do some really fantastic renovations. We did the same thing at Harmony, same thing at Pecan Valley. And the same thing at Sinclair. And so, yes, it is much more cost effective to renovate and repurpose aged facilities than it is to tear down and build new facilities. And so that is definitely a point that was brought forward with the facility study committee, and definitely part of the conversation. And so again, Ms. Banker, I'm sorry I misunderstood your question. And yes, I acknowledge you're exactly right.
All right. All right, so that will do it for this edition of Facebook and YouTube Live. Again, like we mentioned, we'll put up on the website, ecisd.net, right there, the big banner up at the top. We'll put this video up there so you can watch it at any time, and then as well as the presentation. And then, as always, you can always go back and look at old, previous, I would say old, previous lives. If you're on Facebook, just go to videos and you're going to see all of our lives right there. A link to our YouTube is also at ecisd.net. It's at the bottom of the page. You'll see links for all of our social media, and you can go to YouTube and watch any of the previous YouTubes as well, if you do not have a Facebook. So again, I want to thank everybody for their time watching tonight. And Mr. Toscano, as always, thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you all for joining.